exception. Okay, this is very, very important, exception, because you need to protect your system. So now, what is mean by exception? An exception is an event. Remember, exception is an event that occurs during the execution of a program during the runtime, and that disrupts the normal flow of the instructions. That means once you run your program, sometimes you can get the the error message, or sometimes you stack your systems. So this is we call the exception. What is the problem? We call the problem from the system. That is exception. Okay. When an exception condition arises, an object representing that exception is created and thrown in the method that caused the error. So during the once the problem coming, what we do normally? Normally we throw this error message, and later on we'll catch this exception and handle it. Okay, and then last one is exception can be generated by Java runtime. So once you run your program during the runtime, then it will generate it. All right, and we can actually protect this one. We can manually generate the code, and we can protect this kind of exception, this kind of error, this kind of problem. Okay, I hope you understand the concept of exception. Correct? Next, okay, why we need to handle the exception? Because exception is the problem, the error, right? So this basically to able to execute to continue your system. That means if any problem coming, so maybe your system will crash. So you can protect your systems if you can put the code of exception handling techniques, then it can continue your system without interrupt or without hang your system. Okay, and this is also very useful for the user as well. That means user will enter the, for example, wrong informations. So what the system will do? System will protect or give the some message that you are input the wrong information. So try again. So user can get some experiences on that cases. The exception provide information for debugging or technical support. That means what is the problem happened during the exception, that means error, it will give you this message. So you can basically handle this one using exception handling techniques. Okay, it allows the user to modify the user input and continue the user's workflow. Just now I talking about this one. If the user input the wrong informations, if you put the exception handling techniques there, so user cannot key in the wrong informations. It will give you the message that you have key in the wrong information. So you input the correct information in the system. All right, I hope you understand the concept of exception, right? Next, okay, examples of exception. Okay, first one, if you look at the first one, exit program. This is one of the examples of exception. That means abort your systems. Deal with exception and continue. Okay, maybe it can be print error message. It will give the error message, that is the problem happened in your system. So you can print the error message. What is the error? Request new data. That means if you input the wrong data, it will ask you, okay, you input the right data, try again something. It will give you the message so that you can input the right data. Retry actions. That means you can ask to the user, retry again. You input the wrong information or retry. Okay. So now look at the types of exception in Java. There are 3 types of exception in Java. One we call the checked exception, unchecked exception, and error exception. Okay, we'll go one by one, each of the exception. Now look at the representation of exceptions. So first it's coming from where? Object class. Okay, so the object class is the parent class of throwable class. Then from the throwable class, we have the exception class. So all the exception class is under here. So we can actually get the exception class or methods from this exception class. And also we have the error class. Okay, and we have the runtime exception class under the exception parent class. Okay, so we call under the exception class, what are the exception we can caught? We call this is the checked exception, exceptions that must be caught or declared in program. And then you look at the other side, the error. This is we call the unchecked exception. This is serious error that typically program should not have to handle. That means maybe your program can crash. All right. Next, okay, give the idea of the checked exception and the unchecked exception from this class hierarchy. So it's coming from, of course, the object, then throwable class coming. Under the throwable, we have exception class and the error class. All right. So now look at the exception class. We call this is checked exception. So these all are checked exception. The class not found exception, then IO exception, that means input output exception, runtime exception, and many more classes is here. And under the error exception, we have error class, and this is the name of the class is linkage error, virtual machine error, and other more classes here. So under the runtime exception, we have actually unchecked exception, and we have arithmetic exceptions. We are going to use all these things: null pointer exceptions, index out of bound exceptions, illegal argument exceptions, and many other classes here. All right. Next. Okay. Now come to the checked exceptions. Okay. If you look at the checked exceptions, so this is basically in that case what we need to do. We need to use the package we call the java.lang.exceptions. Under this package, we have the classes here, right? IO exception, that means input out expression class. So here we use the method system in.read. Then interrupted exception, we use the class and the function we call the thread.sleep. Then we have the file not found exceptions, file input stream, this function we're going to use for that method, and malformed URL exception, this is used for URL constructor. Okay. Next, move to the unchecked exception. Okay, so unchecked exception is basically the runtime. Okay, so it does not check by the compiler at compile time, so it will check with the runtime. Okay, so unchecked exception, if you look at here, for that cases we need to use the we call the packages is java.lang runtime, and this is the classes. Okay, arithmetic exception, null pointer exceptions, and index out of bound exceptions. Okay. Okay, now come to the error classes. So this is basically a system error thrown by Java virtual machine and presented in the error class. Okay, error class describe internal system errors. For example, dead thread and out of memory error. Okay, so these errors are very fatal, very serious error. Okay, so errors we need to use the package we call the java lang.error, and the classes we use their out of memory error and also stack overflow. Okay. Next, exception handling. So now how you are going to handle this all kind of errors coming during your run your system or during run your program. Okay, so Java exception handling is managed 5 keywords. Look at the keywords: try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. Okay, the program statements to monitor are continued within a try block. Okay, so try block, it will check the program. Okay, so if any problem comes, so we can catch through the catch block, so it will actually get the message we can catch here. Okay, then we have another called the finally block. So the basically, if for example we run the program, if any problem coming, so we can catch through the catch block and we can display the what is the error message. Okay, for example, we don't have any problem, so the catch block will not catch anything. Then of course it will come to lastly the finally block, whether you catch any error or not, the finally block will execute. Okay, so that means if your program you want to test that you don't have any problem, then you can run try block, catch block. If no problem, of course at the end you know in the finally block is execute. That means you don't have any problem in other cases. Okay, I hope you understand what is the use of finally, right? Next, look at the exception handling techniques here. So what you need to do for Java's exception handling model, this is based on 3 operations. First one, declare the exception. Okay, so you need to declare the exceptions. So you look at here, we declare the exception, throws exception, we call declare exception. Okay, next one, throwing the exceptions. We have to throw the exceptions, we call the throwing exception, throw new exception, throwing exception. And then last one is the catch the exception. That means what is the problem happen, then during the execution it will catch. So catch the exception is here, you look at here, catch the exception. All right, so in the try block we run, for example, the method called method2. Once goes to the method to declare the exception, we need to declare first, then we have to throw the exceptions, and then if any problem coming based on the throw the exception, it will catch this exception, and after that you can display the error message here. Okay, I hope you understand the operations in the exception handling model. Okay, next. Okay, try and catch block. Of course, you need to put the try and the catch block. Whatever you put the code here, if any errors or exception occur, it will caught by the catch exception. Okay, then it will handle and display the output. Right. Next. Okay, look at this example. It will give you the idea actually how it works. All right. So this is the class. Okay. Then public static void main string arguments. Then we declare 2 variable here, integer type D and A. Right. Then we use the try block and we use the catch block. Then we display the output. Correct. Now look at here in the catch block, we monitor a block of code. Right. D equal to 0. Value of D equal to 0. All right. A equal to 42 divided by 0. This is not acceptable. Anything divided by 0 is not acceptable. So this is an error. So now if this error coming, that means this is error, right? So now what happened? This error will be catch here. Remember? Okay. And then through the arithmetic exception, we will catch this one. Through the arithmetic exception class object E, right? So now divided by 0 is an error. So what it will do, it will catch here, and then immediately it will display the output divided by 0. That means this is an error divided by 0. Then exit from the catch, and then it will come outside, and after catch statement it will display here. After catch statement. Okay, so you understand actually how we can control the any error message using the arithmetic exception, because this is basically the calculate the value, anything divided by 0. This is not acceptable. So we must have to control and give the output from there. Okay, I hope you understand this example.